The Wicked Will Rise, Chapter 26. Have you ever, either of you, looked at the American state of Kansas on a map? The wizard asked. Before either Dorothy or I could answer or even nod a yes, he went on. If you have, I'm sure you've noticed the shape that it is. Dorothy, Amy, he prompted us like a doubting school teacher. What shape is Kansas? Dorothy answered with confidence. Oh, something like a round blob with a funny little hole shaped like a jolly fat woman cut right out the side of it, she said. I looked at her like she was nuts. If it was anyone except her, I would have felt almost sorry for her to be humiliated like this. Not that I was in much better shape. I had no idea why the wizard cared what shape Kansas was, or why I felt so strange, but it wasn't exactly a hard question, if you were from there, and I knew the answer. It's a rectangle, I said, with a little missing chunk out of the top right-hand corner. I don't know why. The missing bit had always bothered me. It seemed to set everything a little off balance. The wizard smiled dotingly. Correct, he said. Amy gets a gold star. Dorothy wears a dunce cap for spinning foolish taradiddles. But, Dorothy said, sounding like a kid in school who just can't believe she spelled an easy word wrong in the last round of the spelling bee. They must have changed it, she muttered. The wizard shook his head impatiently. I could see that he was getting to a point, but I don't know what it was. Now, girls, can you think of another place that's shaped like a rectangle? Wider than it is tall, with a little chunk cut out of the corner? It struck me immediately. This time Dorothy knew what he meant too. We both answered at the same time. Oz, we both said. The wizard gave a golf clap. Ding, ding, ding. Oz is exactly the same size. And same shape, and it just so happens exactly the same size as the great state of Kansas. There's only one small difference, which is that in Oz, that little chunk missing from the corner is in the west, right where the legendary Valley of Oogaboo would be if it existed, which it doesn't and never did. I glanced at Dorothy, feeling a strange camaraderie with her. She looked as confused as I was. Look, just forget Oogaboo for now. That's a long and extremely boring story that I barely know myself. It's something to do with tariffs and Winky bylaws, if memory serves. In any case, it's not important. Here's the important question. Why do you suppose that Oz and Kansas are so similar, geographically speaking? The answer came to me out of the blue. Because they're the same place, I said. I hadn't really thought about it. It was just sort of there. Something that seemed obvious and familiar, even if it was absurd. Sort of like the concept of pie, I guess. Or something like that. I hedged quickly, embarrassed at how stupid it sounded. But the wizard was looking at me with something like respect. Indeed, Miss Gum, they are, in a way, the same place. Oz and Kansas occupy the same exact physical space, but on two separate vibrational planes. You see, when the fairies created this fountain and called forth the old magic that would be Oz's lifeblood, they weren't just pulling it from nowhere. They were pulling it from Kansas. He gave me a meaningful look. Explains why Kansas is so very dull, doesn't it? The fact is, it used to be a place of power. Dark power. All this time it's been feeding Oz, giving up all its magic so that this place could live. And yet, the balance has never been perfect. It's always been a bit inefficient. I'm going to change that. I'm going to fully open the door between here and there, merge them with one glorious place, and of course, I'm going to put myself in charge. I was trying to piece together everything he was saying, but I felt too muddle-headed. The wizard continued. Now, he said, let's have ourselves a little ritual. Well, not so little, actually. You have no idea how complicated it is to arrange all this. Dorothy, may I have the items? Dorothy didn't resist. She unstrapped her satchel and handed it over to the wizard, who opened it and glanced inside, nodding with approval when he saw what he was looking for. Wonderful, he said, pulling out the heart. I thought Amy here would be able to gather these for me, but when she became too much of a loose cannon, I decided I needed some insurance. I'm glad I did. You did such a good job bringing me what I needed. The heart was pulsing with a strange golden energy, and the wizard held it out and placed it in front of him. And at the level of his chest, Instead of falling to the ground when he took his hand away, it stayed planted in the air, vibrating. Next, he did the same with the lion's tail and the scarecrow's plush brains, which were glowing purple and blue, respectively. I had no idea when I gave those silly things to your friends that I was unwittingly working in the service of the fairies, he said, creating the key that would unlock Oz's true potential. Now, Dorothy, I believe it's time for you to do your part. Yes, she said, zombie-like. She stood and took her place, standing next to the glowing objects. She suddenly looked uncomfortable, and the wizard snapped his fingers in front of her face, freezing her like a statue where she stood. Just in case she gets squirmy, he said. Are you ready, Amy? I stood up from my seat, ready to obey him, but I wasn't sure what he wanted. Yellow, blue, and purple. What's missing? The wizard asked. Red, I replied. The color of the quadlings. That's right. And what's red? Then I understood. Blood, I said. It came out in a whisper. Good girl. It's your big moment. Isn't this what you've been waiting for? I started to say. But even in my blissful, hypnotized state, I knew this wasn't how it was supposed to go. It didn't feel right. The wizard noted my hesitation. You've always been so strong-willed, he said. It's what makes you so special, and I respect that. But it's your choice, Amy. This is what I promised could happen. If you brought me everything I needed, and you've succeeded. After a fashion, I suppose. So go ahead. Take your prize. Everything's in place. So fetch yourself a weapon. My blade appeared in my hand of its own accord, and I held it out in front of me. Just a moment, the wizard said. Before you get carried away, just one more piece of business. In order for me to draw upon the old magic that comes from Kansas and rule over Oz as its rightful king, I need a queen. A real queen. He turned his attention to Ozma, took her hand, and kissed it in a way I guess was supposed to be gentlemanly. It made my skin crawl. How would you like to reclaim your throne? He asked her. Would you like to be yourself again? Would you like to be my bride and sit by the side as Oz's fairy queen? Ozma looked confused, but she was already beginning to change. A pair of huge, shimmering golden butterfly wings, fairy wings, had unfolded from her back. Her green eyes were glowing and her black hair was whipping wildly in every direction. She began to hover a few inches from the ground. Ah, yes, the wizard mused, looking admiringly at her. I've always wanted to see the true aspect of a fairy. Even in my past dealings with them, I knew that they were only revealing themselves in a form that masks their true selves. I can't wait to see what you blossom into once the old magic is truly unleashed. Ozma didn't say anything, but she looked into the sky, where slowly and then quickly a whirling black vortex appeared. As it grew in size, I saw what it was, a tornado, a cyclone, except that it was upside down and inside out, and we were on the other side of the funnel, as if looking down on it from above. The wizard was staring at it almost lovingly. Right on time, he said. It's always so nice when things go as planned. Now, Amy, as someone who hails from the other place, from the very spot where the fountain draws from, and who has learned to channel its old magic with such ease, I'll let you do the honors. It's time for Dorothy to die. I held my knife over my head and felt power pouring into it from out of the funnel in the sky. I felt the wizard's spell in the back of my mind urging me on. I felt the darkness calling me too. Rise, the voices seemed to be saying. Dorothy stood there in front of me, her face frozen into a silly, shy smile, and I almost thought I could see the person she had been. The girl who came to Oz, stopped the witches, and saved the kingdom. Not because she wanted power, but because of her innocence. Because she was good. I know what would happen if I killed her. I would be accepting the mantle I'd been promised. Finally, I would be wicked. Really wicked. And there would be no going back. Rise, the voice hissed again. It was time. I drew my knife back to do it. To kill her. But just as I was about to bring it down, I heard Nox's voice. Don't do it, he screamed. It's a trick. He's fooling you. I spun around to see him pushing out from the hedges. Do it, the wizard hissed. Do it now. Then Ozma began to scream, her gossamer wings flapping wildly, and Pete burst out of her chest. It wasn't like the other times he had transformed. Ozma was still there, still wailing and clutching herself in agony, but Pete was there now too. He doubled across the cobblestones, jumped up and grabbed the wizard's throat. The maelstrom above us whirled, and the wizard cried out. Like that, his spell was broken. I blinked and dropped my knife. It clattered to the cobblestone ground. I wasn't feeling so calm and contented anymore. I was feeling pretty terrified. Dorothy emerged from her trance. "Traitor," she said. She flung a hand out, and like she was pulling a marionette string, Pete flew away from the wizard. She wanted the wizard to herself, and now, as she approached him, his face went white. "I should have done this a long time ago," she said. "Now, let's hear you scream." She clapped her hands together, and the wizard did scream. His body began to ripple and twitch as Dorothy's spell moved through it, and then it was like something was eating him from the inside. "No!" he yelled. "Help me! Amy, help!" But there was nothing I could do. The spell was quick. In an explosion of blood, guts, and glitter, the wizard was no more. The sky opened up, and Kansas rained down on us.